I wish to make a statement on the goods and services tax that came into effect on 1st July 2017. I also wish to explain the Congress Party's stand on the implementation of GST. The GST was envisaged as a single rate of tax on all goods and services that will replace practically all indirect taxes. A single GST rate means a standard rate as well as a standard plus rate on demerit goods and a standard minus rate on merit goods. Some goods and services will also be totally exempt. This is the GST that the Congress Party and the UPA government had visualized and which I had announced on 28 February 2016 as our goal. Mr. Yashwant Sinha has also confirmed that this was the GST we should have designed and implemented. What has been implemented, however, is a GST with 7 or possibly more rates. It is a mockery of GST. When we have rates like 0.25, 3, 5, 12, 18, 28, and 40, and possibly more because of the discretion vested with the state governments, how can we call this a one nation, one tax regime? The central government should have engaged the leaders of the political parties to forge a consensus on 3 rates. It failed to do so. A Congress-led government would have certainly worked hard toward a single rate with 3 variations. Furthermore, we would have capped GST at 18%. That was eminently feasible. The chief economic advisor to this government had clearly recommended a GST rate of 15 to 15.5% and demonstrated that it was a revenue neutral rate. If that report was correct, why did the government go in for rates like 28% and 40%? Besides, we are convinced that the administration and businesses, especially small and medium businesses, are unprepared or underprepared for the rollout of GST. Businesses wanted some more time, and the rollout should have been deferred by 2 months. The GSTN should have been put through a trial run and the glitches of any removed. The numerous requests for rationalization of rates should have been addressed. Businesses should have been given time to familiarize themselves with the task of filing 3 returns every month. The special problems of multi-state businesses should have been resolved. As for the future, the Congress Party will watch out the role of GST closely. We will continue to articulate the fears and grievances of small and medium businesses, multi-state businesses, and consumers. We will demand that petroleum products, electricity, and real estate be brought under GST. We will press for a reduction in rates. We will demand a cap of 18%. We will keep vigil over the possible misuse of the draconian powers given to the Anti-Profiteering Authority. And finally, we will highlight the elements of a true GST. We will hold meetings and conferences to emphasize that the Congress was the original proponent of GST, and we will campaign for a true GST that was designed and advised by tax experts such as Dr. Vijay Kelkar and Dr. Parthasarathi Shom. Thank you. Real estate. Yeah, petroleum, electricity, and real estate. Give them copies.
Yes, sir. We are going to give copies. So when they leave, normally we give.
Yes.
So he's basically saying that why did you as finance minister keep GST network out of the preview of CAG? Why
No, I don't think a final decision had been taken at that time to keep the GSTN outside the CAG. I don't think a final decision had been taken. I think it was at the stage of discussion. One has to go back and look at the file. How can I recall after 3 years?
Can you speak loudly, please?
See, alcohol is more complex than petroleum, electricity, and real estate, because this arises out of privileges enjoyed by state governments for a long time, since the Abkari Act time. Ideally, alcohol should also come under GST, but that requires more discussion and building a consensus. But clearly, petroleum, electricity, and real estate is beyond controversy. They should come under GST. No, GST first, please. Well, it's too early. I think I was in my constituency. A large number of hotels are still issuing kacha receipts on a piece of paper. A large number of them are not issuing receipts for payments made. It's too early, but theory says that since 80% of goods and services will bear a tax from 1st of July, which will be higher than the tax burden prior to 1st of July, theory says it will be inflationary. In fact, a number of economists have said it will be inflationary in the short run.
One sec, I'll come for a second.
Well, I don't know where they get that number within 3 days. As I said, it's only when the GST and returns are filed for a period of time you can come to those conclusions.
1 second, please. You have to see. We have to accept, no, that it has to be in a certain order, Mr. Manoj. I'll come to you.
There was discussion before the GST Constitution Amendment Bill was passed. And we suggested changes in the Constitution Amendment Bill. Some changes were accepted, some were not. You recall the debate on the Constitution Amendment Bill. Although we had some reservations, we agreed to pass the Constitution Amendment Bill. After that, when the CGST and IGST bills were discussed in Parliament, I do not recall any discussion between the government and leaders of the Congress party in Parliament. Those two bills were only debated in Parliament. There was no discussion outside Parliament, or there was no informal consultation.
You wanted to ask? No. First, she's been waiting for the longest time.
See, GDP is not dependent upon one factor. GDP is dependent upon a number of factors: international trade, prices of oil, exports and imports, investments. Therefore, you can't say GST will add to GDP, will not add to GDP. Well, that would be a very naive conclusion. In fact, one of the members of the Niti Aayog has said that there's no direct correlation between GST and GDP growth. Therefore, to suggest that the moment you roll out GST, GDP will grow by an additional 2% is purely speculative. Oh, I think all's well in this world and God is in his heaven. Demonetization has solved all our problems. Demonetization has abolished black money. There no more fake currency. Demonetization has put an end to corruption. What are you complaining about? Demonetization is God's gift to India.
Can you speak loudly?
What is the desired result? The desired result is one indirect tax that will subsume all indirect taxes. This GST will not achieve that result. I thought black money and corruption were put an end to by demonetization. What are you again putting an end to? I thought demonetization put an end to corruption. So why do you want GST to put an end to corruption? There's no corruption today. Take it from me, there's no corruption at all.
Sunil Prabhu. I'll come.
The focus of the Prime Minister's office and the Cabinet Secretary in the last 1 week has been to actually stop inflationary pressures, and they are really working on that issue. So in that context, what steps have you believe the Congress Party is happy with those steps that have been taken? Because even Consumer Affairs has issued an order. Do you believe that GST will not be inflationary? And what steps would you advise the government to take to ensure that at least the common man does not get affected?
No, we certainly welcome any step that the government will take to keep inflation down. It implies that even government believes that GST will be inflationary in the short run. So if government is taking countermeasures to keep inflationary pressures down, we wholeheartedly welcome it. No, we are only on GST, madam. We are only on GST. Yes.
Anita.
You see, I read today that in respect of existing stock, the government is allowing them to put stickers indicating the new price without erasing or obliterating the old price. Well, I suppose this is a desperate measure because people will get confused. You buy a packet, there'll be an old price, there'll be a sticker with a new price. I think all this will lead to confusion. But this is a desperate measure. I don't think government quite addressed the issue of stock. Anyway, they're trying to make the best of a bad arrangement. As I said, the nation is unprepared or underprepared. They should have made it clear that there will be a trial run for about 2 months, deferred the actual rollout to say 1st of September, and made it clear that all existing stocks must be cleared in these 2 months. There are ways in which this could have been addressed, but that's now behind us. So I think they're trying to make a best of a bad situation.
You want to ask?
Extension of faith. There is an imminent threat now. The tax GST unraveling if states like Tamil Nadu impose additional taxes on agri taxes.
He's absolutely right. For your information, Tamil Nadu has passed an ordinance empowering municipalities to levy an additional 30% tax on cinema tickets. The two tax rates are 18% if the ticket is under 100 rupees, 28% if the ticket is more than 100 rupees. On top of that, they have allowed them to impose an additional 30%. This is what I allude to in my statement. There are today 7 rates. if you allow states also to exercise their discretion and impose a tax, calling it by whatever name, you will have so many rates that this will have the danger of unraveling GST. I entirely agree with Mr. Yashwant Sinha. Of course, this is a preview.
Ma'am.
No, every reform is disruptive is a normative statement. It's all right. Every reform will be disruptive to some people. But you should have prepared better. You should have allowed people to prepare better. For example, Amit Mitra, West Bengal finance minister, says there are 66 lakh traders and businessmen in West Bengal. The GSTN was tested on a sample of 200. Now, how can you test GSTN on a sample of 200 and then say 66 lakh traders and businesses are fully ready for the rollout of GST and GSTN? So I think more time should have been granted. I suggested a trial run for 2 months. Both systems running parallelly for 2 months. GST will run on a trial basis, and then effectively it can come into force on 1st of September. Which means the government does not believe in a GST. By definition, GST is a single tax. If you think that the country is not yet ready for a single tax, don't have it, but don't call it GST. Don't say we're implementing GST. The world over, GST is a single tax. For Indian conditions, we recommended, Mr. Yashwant Sinha has concurred with that view, there can be a standard, standard minus, standard plus. Please read the Chief Economic Advisor's report. The Chief Economic Advisor's report also says standard, standard minus, standard plus. That is a single tax with Indian variations. But if you have 7 rates and 8 rates, and in course of time you have 10 rates, call it your Indian tax system, ITS. Don't call it GST. Call it an Indian indirect tax system. Well, that's a more complex issue. There is Article 370, and I think the government has to work with the J&K government and impress upon them that without diluting Article 370, it is possible to implement GST in Jammu and Kashmir. I think this requires discussion rather than acrimony. I think it's possible to convince the J&K government that without diluting Article 370, it is possible to implement GST in J&K. And I urge you, don't make this a matter of acrimony between J&K and the government of India.
Let that be the last question.
VAT was a success. Who's complaining about VAT? Every state government is making more revenue through VAT than the earlier sales tax, because VAT is a value-added tax. So VAT was a success. I sincerely hope GST will be a success. But this, I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. This is not the GST that we envisaged. What's the point? Members spoke on those matters. Members asked for a cap of 18%. The government said we will keep all that in mind when we actually finalize the rates. The CGST and IGST bills are enabling bills. These details are not in the bills. These details are by notifications. So while you carried forward the CGST and IGST bills, you should have tried to make it as perfect a GST as possible. This is a very, very imperfect GST. Sorry, only about GST, madam. If you want to ask about GST, please ask. Yes. Yes. Those are words which you can use. I belong to a responsible political party. All I can say is that this is not the GST that we envisaged when I announced it on 18th of February 2006. And Mr. Yashwant Sinha, who appointed the Empowered Committee, concurs and says this is not the GST that he envisaged too. So neither Mr. Yashwant Sinha nor I nor my successor, the Honorable Mr. Pranab Mukherjee, envisaged this GST. This is not the GST which Dr. Manmohan Singh envisaged. This is a very different animal. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.